Working conditions for special group of employees. Apprentice and learners. What is apprenticeship? Apprenticeship is a practical training on a job supplemented by related theoretical instruction. Labor Code Article 58. Apprenticeship is a system of training where an individual learns a trade or skill through hands-on experience, while working under the supervision of a skilled worker. In addition to gaining practical work experience, apprentices also receive theoretical instruction to support their learning. This combination of practical training and classroom education help the apprentice develop the necessary skill to perform the job independently. For example, a young person who wants to become a skilled electrician might enter an apprenticeship program. During the apprenticeship, they would work under the guidance of a licensed electrician, gaining hands-on experience by installing wirings, maintaining electrical system, and troubleshooting issues. They would attend classes to learn the theory behind electrical system, safety standards, and electrical code. By the end of apprenticeship, the apprentice would be equipped with the both practical skill and theoretical knowledge to become a certified electrician. What is an apprenticeable occupation? Apprenticeable occupation is an occupation officially endorsed by the tripartite body and approved by the apprenticeship by TESTA. RA number 7796, Section 4. Under Republic Act number 7796, TESDA Law, Section 4, it specifies the occupation must endorsed by the tripartite body and approved by TESDA to considered apprenticeable. For example, a common example of apprenticeable occupation is electrician. In the Philippines, an individual aspiring to become an electrician could enroll in the apprenticeship program approved by TESTA. This program would involve practical training with employer, learning how to install, maintaining, and repair technical system, combined with school lesson or technical theory and safety standard. After completing the apprenticeship, the individual will gain the skill and certification needed to work as a qualified electrician. Technical Education and Skills Development Authority is a government agency in the Philippines that provides technical and vocational training program. It aims to improve the skill of the workforce to enhance employability and competitiveness in the various industries. What is the period of apprenticeship? The period of apprenticeship shall not exceed 6 months. 1. 400 hours or 2 months for trade or occupation which normally required a year or more for proficiency. And 2. 200 hours or 1 month for occupation and job which require more than 3 months, but less than 1 year for proficiency. The period of apprenticeship refers to the length of time a person works in a specific trade or occupation to gain the necessary skill and knowledge before becoming fully proficient in the job. The Labor Code provides a maximum duration for apprenticeship which is typically up to 6 months. The period is broken down into 2 categories. For trade or occupation that normally require a year or more to become a proficient. The apprenticeship period shall be 400 hours or about 2 months. For example, if someone is learning carpentry, which generally takes over a year to master, they would undergo apprenticeship of around 2 months. Gaining hands-on experience, undergo to supervision. For occupation that requires more than 3 months but less than a year to become proficient, The apprenticeship period shall be 200 hours or about 1 month. For example, a person training to become a chef may be required to undergo an apprenticeship for 1 month, since it takes several months, but not a full year, to acquire proficiency in the kitchen. When is there no valid apprenticeship? There is no valid apprenticeship if, number 1, the agreement submitted to TESDA was made long after the workers started undergoing apprenticeship. Number 2, the work performed by the apprentice was different from those adjectives. Number 3, approved by TESDA, the workers undergoing apprenticeship are already skilled workers. And number 4, the workers were required to continue undergoing the apprenticeship beyond 6 months. An apprenticeship agreement is a formal agreement between employer and apprentice, usually involving training for a specific skill or trade. The agreement needs to follow certain guidelines set by TESDA in the Philippines. If any of the following conditions are violated, there may be no valid apprenticeship. If the employer submitted the apprenticeship agreement to TESDA long after the apprentice has already started working, the apprenticeship may not be considered valid. This suggests that the apprenticeship was not formally established or authorized from the beginning. For example, if an apprentice began working in the company in January, but the employer only submitted the apprenticeship agreement to TESDA in June after the apprentice are already working for months, the apprentice may not be recognized as valid. The work performed by the apprentice is different from what was approved by TESDA. The apprenticeship agreement must outline specific tasks and training relevant to the apprentice's field. If the apprentice end up to
What are the distinctions between learnership and apprenticeship? As to practical training, both involves practical training on the job. As to wage rate, not less than 75% of the statutory minimum. As to percentage in the workforce, not less than 20% in the regular workforce. As to nature occupation, semi-skilled or other occupations. Apprenticeship, highly technical industry. As to theoretical instruction, learnership may or may not be supplemented by theoretical instruction. Apprenticeship, always supplemented by theoretical instruction. As to period, learnership, not to exceed 3 months. Apprenticeship, not less than 4 months but not exceeding 6 months. As when to employable, when no experienced workers are available, when necessary to prevent curtailment of employment opportunities, and when employment does not create unfair competition. Apprenticeship, no condition set by law. As to hiring after training period, learnership, required to hire. Apprenticeship, has the option to hire or not. As to qualifications, learnership, law does not provide for qualifications of learners. Apprenticeship, at least 15 years of age, physical fit for the occupation, passes vocational aptitude and capacity for appropriate, and passes the ability to comprehend, to follow written instructions. Disabled workers, who are persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities, PWDs, are those suffering from restriction or different abilities as a result of a mental, physical, or sensory impairment. To perform an activity in the manner or within the range considered normal for a human being. Republic Act No. 7277, otherwise known as Magna Carta for Disabled Persons, as amended by Republic Act No. 9442 and Republic Act No. 10070, Title 1, Chapter 1, Section 4A. The definitions of persons with disabilities, as is stated in the Magna Carta, for disabled persons highlights that disabilities arise from physical, mental, or sensory impairment. This impairment can either partially or fully limit a person's ability to perform daily activities, tasks, or roles in a way is commonly expected in society. Disabilities can be permanent or temporary, visible like using a wheelchair, or invisible like hearing loss or a mental health condition. This legal definition is crucial because it ensures PWDs are recognized and protected under the law, enabling them to access equal opportunities in education, employment, healthcare, and social participation. It also emphasizes the need for society to remove barriers and provide accommodations to help them achieve their full potential. For example, a man who is visually impaired may find it difficult to read printed materials, which is considered a sensory impairment. However, with accommodations like screen reader, software, braille documents, or audio recordings, he can work in an office, pursue higher education, or participate in activities. Without such tools or inclusive practices, his conditions might unfairly limit his opportunities. This shows how the societal, environment, and support system can either amplify or reduce the challenges faced by PWDs. The law ensures that systems are in the place to make these accommodations.
What are the provisions on verbal or nonverbal public ridicule and vilification? The provision on verbal or nonverbal public ridicule and vilification are as follows. No individual, group, or community shall execute any acts of ridicule against PWDs in any time and place, which should intimidate or result in loss of self-esteem of a latter. RA number 7277 as amended Sector 40, and any individual, group, or community is hereby prohibited from vilifying any person with disability which could result in loss of self-esteem of the latter. RA 7277 as amended Sector 42. This provision prohibits any action, whether verbal or nonverbal, that mocks or belittles person with disabilities, PWDs. Ridicule can happen in public or private settings and often leads to feelings of shame, intimidation, or a loss of self-esteem for the PWDs. Example: a teacher imitates the stutter of a student with a speech impediment in front of a whole class, causing the student to feel embarrassed and lose confidence in speaking. Impact: such an creates an intimidating environment, lowering the student's self-esteem and possible affecting their participation in school activities. Provision on vilification of PWDs. This provision prohibits any speech, action, or portrayal that paints PWDs in negative or degrading light. Vilification goes beyond ridicule. It can involve spreading harmful stereotypes or falsehoods about PWDs that diminish their value or worth in the eyes of others. Example: a business owner publicly states that hiring PWDs is a waste of resource because they are less productive than others. This kind of statement discourages employers from giving PWDs equal opportunities and makes PWDs feel devalued. So the impact is statement like this contribute to discrimination, social exclusion, and loss of self-esteem among PWDs. In summary, both provision under RA number 7277 or Magna Carta for Disabled Person aim to protect PWDs from harm caused by hurtful action, words, or portrayals while ridicule focuses on mocking or teasing. Vilification involves degrading or demeaning representations that undermine the dignity and rights of PWDs. This law encourages respect and inclusion for all. What is impairment? Impairment is any loss, diminution, or aberration of physiological, psychological, or anatomical structure or function. RA 77 as amended Sector 40. Impairment refers to any condition where a part of the body or mind does not work as it should. It could involve a loss, reduction, or irregularity in how someone's physical, mental, or anatomical system function. This term is broad and can include physical disabilities, mental health condition, or other function limitation. Example on physical impairment. A person who has lost a leg due to an accident. This is an anatomical loss affecting the person's ability to walk. Psychological impairment. Example, a person with severe depression who struggles with daily activities. This is a mental condition that affects psychological functioning. Physiological impairment. Example, a person with a heart condition that reduces their ability to engage in strenuous activity. This is a physiological limitation impacting the body's function. Impairments are not the same as disabilities. They are the underlying condition that may lead to a disability when combined with environmental or social barriers. What is disability? Disability shall mean a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more psychological, physiological, or anatomical function of an individual or activities of such individual. A record of such an impairment or being regarded as having such as impairment, RA 77 as amended Sector 40. So, a disability refers to a condition that significantly affects a person's ability to perform daily activities or function due to physical or mental impairment. It includes not only current impairments, but also past impairments or even cases where someone's treated as if they have impairment regardless of whether they do. A physical or mental impairment that limits function. So, example, a person with paralysis in their legs who uses a wheelchair for mobility. The impairment paralysis limits their ability to walk, a major life activity. A record of such impairment. Example, a person who recovered from cancer but faces discrimination in employment due to their medical history. Although they no longer have cancer, their history of condition is considered a disability under this definition. Being regarded as having such an impairment. Example, a person with a visible birthmark on their face is avoided by others because people wrongly assume they have a contagious condition. They do not have an actual impairment but they are treated as they do, which classifies as a disability under this law. This definition emphasizes not only the existence of physical or mental limitation but also social perception and records that may affect a person's rights and opportunities. What is handicap? Handicap refers to a disadvantage for a given individual resulting from an impairment or a disability that limits or prevents the function or activity that is considered normal given the age and sex of the individual. RA number 7277 as amended Sector 40. A handicap is a disadvantage that arises when a person's impairment or disability makes it harder or impossible to perform activities considered normal for their age and gender. It is not just about the physical or mental condition itself, but how the condition interacts with an environment or social expectation. Example of physical handicap. A person who uses a wheelchair cannot enter a building because it only has stairs. The person's impairment becomes a handicap due to the lack of wheelchair access in the environment. Mental handicap. A student with dyslexia struggles to keep up in a classroom where there are no special reading aids. The learning disability becomes a handicap in an environment that does not provide appropriate support. Age-related handicap. An elderly person with poor vision cannot read public transport schedules because the font is too small. The impairment of poor vision turns into handicap because the environment does not accommodate their needs. In essence, a handicap is the result of the interaction between a person's condition and barriers in the environment of social setup.
Who is a qualified individual with disability? A qualified individual with disability is an individual with a disability who are, with or without reasonable accommodation, can be performed the essential function of the employment position that such individual holds of desire. Let me explain. A qualified individual with disability is someone who meets the skill, experience, education, or other job-related requirements of position and can perform its essential function with or without reasonable accommodation. Let me give an example. Accountant with visual impairment. A certified accountant who is blind but uses screen reader software to perform essential job duties like preparing financial reports and analyzing data. Where qualified disabled employees not considered as special workers under Article 80 of Labor Code. The Magna Carta for Disabled Person mandates the qualified disabled employee should be given the same terms and conditions of employment as a qualified able-bodied person. The fact that the employees were qualified disabled person necessarily removes the employment contracts from the arbit of Article 80 on special workers. Since the Magna Carta accords them the right of qualified able-bodied person, they are thus covered by Article 280 of the Labor Code on regular employment. Let me explain. Under Article 80 of Philippine Labor Code, qualified employees who are not considered special are those who are not classified as apprentice, learners, or handicapped workers. For example, regular employees. Regular employees, workers who have completed the probationary period and are performing the regular tasks of their position. What should be the contents of employment agreement of handicapped workers? The employment agreement must include, number 1, the names and addresses of the handicapped workers to be employed. Number 2, the rate to be paid, which shall be not less than 75% of the applicable legal minimum wage. Number 3, the duration of employment period. And number 4, the work to be performed by the handicapped workers. The employment agreement shall be subject to inspection by the Secretary of Labor and Employment or his duty authorized representatives. An employment agreement for handicapped workers as provided under Article 81 of Philippine Labor Code should be include the following essential contents. Number 1, nature of work. Nature of work, a clear description of the duties and responsibilities suited to the worker's ability. Another example, compensation. The wage or salary agreed upon which must comply with labor standards. Another example, working hours. The specific hour of work ensuring reasonable conditions suitable for workers' capabilities.
What are the proof for entitlement to privilege? To be entitled to privilege such as discount or other benefits, disabled person need to submit one or more. The following are required to be submitted. First is passport. This can serve as identification for disabled person. For example, a person with disability is traveling and needs to access discounted transportation fares. The person present their valid passport to show their identity and disability status, qualifying for transportation discounts for disabled individual. Number 2. Identification card issued by the mayor or barangay captain where the disabled person resides or. This must be issued by the mayor or barangay captain of the area where the disabled person resides. It serves as an official proof of the individual disability and residency. For example, if a disabled individual applies for local government benefits such as healthcare assistance or transport discount, the person provides an ID issued by the mayor or barangay captain of their place or residence, confirming their disability and residence in the area, enabling them to access local government privilege for disabled person. Number 3. Transportation discount fare ID issued by National Council for the Welfare of Disabled Person. This ID allows the holder to avail of transportation discounts as per the provision of RA number 7277 as amended specifically section 32 paragraph 2, rights and privilege of disabled person with respect to employment. What are the rights and privilege of disabled person with respect to employment? According to Republic Act number 7277, the Magna Carta for disabled person are entitled to the following employment-related rights. The following are the rights of privilege of disabled person with respect to employment. Equal opportunity for employment. No disabled person shall be denied access to opportunities for suitable employment. A qualified disabled employee shall be subject to the same terms and conditions of employment and the same compensation, privilege, benefits, and fringe benefits, incentives, or allowances as a qualified able-bodied person. RA number 7277 as amended. A company is hiring for an office position and a qualified disabled applicant applies. Applicant for right, the company must provide the same opportunity for employment to the disabled applicant as they would to any other applicant. They cannot deny the disabled person employment solely based on their disability.
Apprenticeship. Disabled person shall be eligible as apprentice or learners, provided that their handicap is not much as effective impede the performance of job operation in the particular occupation for which they are hired, provided further that after the lapse of the period of apprenticeship, if found satisfactory in the job performance, they shall be eligible for employment. RA number 7277 as amended Title 2, Chapter 1, Section 1. Sheltered employment. If suitable employment for disabled persons cannot be found through open employment as provided in the immediately processing section, the state shall endeavor to provide it by means of sheltered employment. RA number 7277. As amended Title 2, Chapter 1, Section 6. Sheltered employment refers to the provision of productive work for disabled persons through workshops providing special facilities, income-producing projects, or homework schemes with a view to giving them the opportunity to earn a living, thus enabling them to acquire a working capacity required in an open industry RA number 7277 as amended Title 1, Chapter 1, Section 4. Vocational Rehabilitation RA number 7277 as amended. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, shall design and implement training programs that will provide disabled persons with vocational skills to enable them to engage in livelihood activities or obtain gainful employment. The DOLE shall likewise design and conduct training programs geared towards providing disabled persons with skills for livelihood RA number 7277 as amended Title 2, Chapter 1, Section 9, Part 3. Vocational Guidance and Counseling RA number 7277 as amended Title 2, Chapter 1, Section 10, and Non-Discrimination on Employment RA number 7277 as amended Title 3, Chapter 1, Section 32, Part 1.
What are the acts of discrimination against PWDs? For one, limiting, segregating, or classifying a disabled job applicant that adversely affects his work opportunities. 2. Using qualification standards, employment tests, or other selection criteria that screen out or tend to screen out a disabled person unless such standards, tests, or other selection criteria are shown to be job-related for the position on question and are consistent with business necessity. 3. Reassigning or transferring a disabled employee to a job or position he cannot perform by reason of his disability. 4. Utilizing standard criteria or methods of administration that have the effect of discrimination on the basis of disability or perpetuate the discrimination of others who are subject to common administrative control. 5. Providing less compensation such as salary, wage, or other forms of remuneration and fringe benefits to a qualified disabled employee by reason of his disability than the amount to which an disabled person performing the same work is entitled. 6. Performing a non-disabled employee over a qualified disabled employee with respects to promotion, training opportunities, study, and scholarship grants solely on account of the latter's disability.
7. Failing to administer employment taxes effectively for the disabled person. Employers must ensure that tax given to the applicants or the employees measured to the required skill, attitude, or the other job-related factors. This tax must not disadvantage disabled applicants by focusing on their impairments such as sensory or speaking skills, unless those are directly relevant to the job. Example, visually impaired applicant applies for the programming job, but the company uses a written text that cannot be accessed with the screen reader. This disadvantages the applicant even through the job itself only requires encoding skills that the applicant excels in. 8. Dismissing determinating the service of disabled employees by reason of his disability unless the employer can prove that can impairs the satisfactory performance of the work involved to the prejudice of the business entity. Provided, however, that the employer's suit provide the reasonable accommodation for disabled person and Lastly, dismissing or terminating disabled employees solely due to their disability. An employer cannot determinate the disabled employees just because of their disability, unless the employers can prove that disability significantly affects the employee's ability to perform the job and reasonably accommodation have already been attempted and failed. Example, a call center employee with the hearing impairment is dismissed because they struggle with the hearing customer calls. However, the employees did not consider providing assistively technology like real-time captionative device which could have enabled to employees to perform their tasks effectively.
What are the incentives for employees hiring PWDs? The incentives for employers hiring PWDs are as follows. Private entities that employ disabled persons who meet the required skills or qualifications, either as regular employee, apprentice, or earner, shall be entitled to an additional deduction from their gross income equivalent to 25% of the total amount paid as salaries and wages to disabled persons, provided, however, that such entities present proof as certified by the DOLE that disabled persons are under their employee provided. Further, the disabled employee is accredited with the DOLE and the Department of Health as to his disability, skills, and qualifications. Tax deductions are given to businesses that employ persons with disability but subject to fulfillment of certain requirements to validate the disability status and qualifications of the employee. For instance, to be availed of the tax deduction, such employee would have to be a regular employee who has met the required skills and qualifications of their job. The employee's disability must likewise have been verified by both DOLE and DOH as recognized and qualified for the job. For tax deduction examples, if the company pays the employee, let's say, 30,000 pesos a month, the company apply the tax deduction that equals to 25% of the employee's salary since the employee is disabled. For final result for the company's instance, the company deducts 7,500 from the gross income, which leads to lower the taxable income for the period, and it reduces the amount of taxes that the company needs to pay. Private entities that improve or modify their physical facilities in order to provide reasonable accommodation for disabled person shall also be entitled to an additional deduction from their net taxable income, equivalent to 50% of the direct cost of the improvements or modifications. Republic Act No. 7277 as amended, Title 2, Chapter 1, Section 8. So the provision allows the private entities such as the businesses and the companies to receive tax incentives in making physical improvements to the facilities that accommodate PWDs. The business can deduct 50% of the direct cost that is related to the improvements from their net taxable income. For example, in tax deduction calculation, the company deduct 50% of total direct cost of modification. And for the example of impact on taxable income, if the company can reduce its net taxable income, let's say 75,000 pesos, lowering the amount of the taxes that needs to pay. Also, this can provide a financial incentives for businesses or a company in making their facilities and more accessible to PWDs.